Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. Today's webinar will be about advanced brush customization in Clip Studio Paint, presented by Ryan Cardinal. Before we begin the webinar, there are some housekeeping items that we'd like to go through. The webinar will be approximately 1 hour long. All attendees will be muted. Questions and answer session will be during the last 15 minutes of the webinar. Attendees can ask questions in the GoToWebinar question box right away. Due to time constraints, not all questions will be answered. The webinar will be recorded. The recording will be shared on social media and will be sent via email to all registrants and attendees. The panelists are Fahim Nias, Joanna Brower, Mari Quiñones, myself, and Ryan Cardinal. For those of you who are joining us for the very first time or have never heard about Clip Studio Paint, Clip Studio Paint is your all-in-one solution for stunning, ready-to-publish illustrations, comics, manga, and animations. Learn more at clipstudio.net/n and graphixly.com. And with that, we'd like to pass the reins of the webinar to Ryan and his presentation, Advanced Brush Customization in Clip Studio Paint. Thank you so much.
Hey everybody, show my screen here. Hello. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody can hear me fine. I'm Ryan Cardinal. I'm a veteran of 20 years of tattooing. I'm also a storyboard artist and comic book illustrator here in Vancouver, British Columbia. And I'm gonna go through how I use Clip Studio Paint and get the results with the brushes that I use for my comic book as well as for tattooing. I hope this is going to be really informative for everybody. And yeah, I'll just kind of go along here and show you how I use Clip Studio. I'm going to start really simple. I'm just going to start with the standard G pen here. And from there, I'm just going to open up the window setting, and I just want to give everybody a heads up. I'm using like an older Wacom 21UX. That's why it's kind of square looking, but the thing works great. And yeah, it's been with me for a while. So what we got here is just a standard brush pen, and I'm just going to run through some of the regular brushes and the tool settings here, just so we can see how it works, how it operates, and then from there we'll kind of go on and into some of the other stuff that I do. So as we all know, standard G pen, totally awesome, one of my go-tos. And with the brush size here, obviously we can increase, decrease, but over here, this is where things can get fun. So right now we just have it set to pressure sensitivity on, tilt on, but one of the things that I like doing is turning on the velocity of this. So, oh, my cat just knocked over something. All right. So once we have the velocity turned on, if you start moving quickly back and forth, we can see that it kind of starts disappearing. But if you slow down, you kind of get these little balls at the end of the brush. Now, if you're really interested in calligraphy effects or ballpoint or brush stroke making, so it looks like an actual traditional brush, this is a great setting to turn on. So that's simply just the velocity feature in the brush size. And from there, you can adjust how much you want it to affect. I'll just increase there just a little bit more so we can see it and clear this off. And I'll make a quick little brush so you can see how this really comes into effect when you start playing with different brushes and different techniques. So I'm just going to make a quick little brush right now, and you can follow along with me and see how this is all going to pan out. Clear this off and make a new layer, which you got right there. And I'm just going to just literally scribble a weird shape. And I'm going to use this brush with these settings. So we go to Edit, register material, image, and it'll bring up this window. And I'm just going to write this down as test 2020. That way I can find it easy. Go down here, use for brush tip shape. Click on that. Come over here to all materials, image material, and hit brush. Now, another thing that you probably want to do is put a search tag in it. That way it's easier to find amongst all your different materials. So I'm just going to do this as, let's see, 2020 brush test and 1. So we go like that and press OK. Now that we got our weird little squiggle, our weird little shape, we want to apply this to a brush. So the way that I usually do this is I will make a copy of the G pen. So we just come down here and create a copy of current selected subtool. And once we click on that, this will pop up, and then we can name that as well. And brush this 2020. There we go. And that'll pop up at the very bottom of your subtool pen there. Now that we have this, we can go over here into the brush tip, and we have this section right here. And now we want to add a material. So we click on material, and where it says click here to add brush tip shape, that's what we're going to do. So we click on that, and this brings up the search window. Now, don't get afraid of all this stuff just because it's all fresh, it's all new. It's your friend in the long run. So because we added that tag in there, let's see, test. I'll be able to find all my test brushes that I've been working on, and there we go. We click on that and press OK. And now we have this brush. So we're going to go back to brush size at the very top. And it should act more like a traditional brush with the way that the ends will react. And this is great for, like, like I said, calligraphy, all that fun stuff. Unfortunately, my writing is awful, so my calligraphy is not that good. But if you guys are out there and you guys are calligraphy people, Clip Studio has an awesome setup just because of the way that you can alter all the brushes. So that's one of the ways that I like to adjust my brushes, especially with velocity. It's a lot of fun. I'm just going to clear all this off and go back to the standard G pen. One of the other things with Clip Studio Paint, I don't know if any of you have experienced this, but if you're trying to make the brush big, really big, and you find that it butts up against kind of like this invisible barrier where it just stops. So I'm just going to increase my brush as big as I can here. So even though I'm pressing my button to make it as big as possible, it hits this limit. Sometimes you have a softer brush and you just want to really like feather the edges on a painting or a picture that you're making, but it's just not big enough. What you want to do is go to specify by screen or specify size on screen. And once you click that, and I'm just going to zoom out here, make a little bit more space. Now you can make the brush literally as big as you want on the screen. This was something that I found out about while just playing around with the brush engine. I was like, oh, finally, this is the thing that I wanted. Just because I had like big soft air brushes that I was trying to do stuff with, and once I found this out, it made everything so much easier. So yeah, so if you want it, so it's specified by the size on the screen, just click that on, and you'll be able to make that brush literally as big as you want on screen. And if you don't, click it off, and it'll just max out to what the brush parameters will allow with the brush size there. So hopefully that's a little trick and tip that can help you guys out there. And sorry about that. I'm just going to take a sip of water here. All right. And now we're going to go down. Now we're going to check with ink. and just want to run through some of the stuff, how I use it for my drawing purposes. Go right there. So one of the brushes that I really like using just for drawing is the just the standard darker pencil, which usually comes just on normal mode. You know, standard brush. Let's do it red. I like using red just because of the animation pencils back in the day. And I have my opacity set. But the other thing that I like to do is I like to set it to multiply. And while I'm doing this, it'll allow me to get an actual like dark line. And the way that I like to draw is, you know, if I'm doing my gestures and stuff like that, and if there's a line that I really like and I hit it, I want to be able to kind of like really emphasize that line. And with this brush setting, it helps me darken that line. So that way, when I go to ink over it, I really know where I want to hit that line. Because sometimes you get that energy right off the bat, and you have a tendency to lose it. And I find if I just have it set this way to multiply, I'm able to kind of like carve out that energy a little bit better. So that's one of my favorite brush settings on Clip Studio Paint here too. Obviously, there is a ton of stuff that you can go into with the color mixing here. Mainly, I deal with a lot of line work with my drawings when it comes to tattooing and comic books. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be delving too much into the color mixing aspect of this right now. I'm going to focus more on line quality, line work, and how I use brushes, and mainly how I use the brush engine to get specific desired results. I'm going to show a couple brushes that I've been working on here. These are some new ones, and I'm going to go into the kind of mindset of how I go about using brushes. So for my comic books, I got a lot of things that I'm going to be drawing over and over and over again. Now this is going to be brushes, trees, branches, all this kind of stuff. So to speed up my process, I work in the front end a lot. This way, when I get to the process of drawing the comic book, I have all my brushes ready and it speeds up my entire process. So I kind of like trade off what I'm going to do in the beginning versus how much quicker I'm going to be able to do stuff in the end. Hopefully that makes sense. And the way that I set up the brushes is very indicative of how this process speeds everything up. Let's see here. So I got these test brushes, and I'm making a little package for everybody. I'm going to have my my Gumroad site up, and with this, everyone will be able to download these brushes in and use these tester brushes that I made up. And with this test brush, I have it set up so you can see. So let's clear that off. There we go. Just how the brush will rotate, spin, all this kind of stuff when you actually start using different aspects of the thickness, the angle, brush density, all this kind of stuff. And I found with this brush, it's a nice way to visually see everything that's going on. So I'll go through this, and then from there, we'll see how I can apply that to different things. So right now, I just have the thickness set on the standard. That way, as I draw the brush, we can really see how it's twisting and how it's turning. You can see the north, east, southwest of it. And then from here, we can start adjusting with different things like the angle. So here we have the angle dynamics. This is where things can get really, really fun when you get into really, really creative brushes. So right now, there's no input. So this is just the standard way of the brush. So we're going to put on direction of pen. So this means whatever direction that I'm going with the pen, it's going to lock to it. So I'm just going to clear this off. So I'm going to go in this motion this way, and then we'll see how the pen reacts. And I'm going to come down, and we kind of see how it kind of locks in place differently than with nothing. There we go. Rotation of pen. Now, unfortunately, My pen doesn't react with the rotation, but if you have this on, if you do have a newer model with Wacom, it will adjust with the rotation of the pen, which is actually pretty neat too. But one that I use is a directional line as well. We're going to clear this off, and this is just to help everybody see how this brush and how other brushes that you make are gonna operate with it. So this one, as you can see, it acts a little bit differently when you have this setting on. It seems to have, you know, that one aspect where the blue there is kind of like dominantly on top. So depending on what style of brush that you have and that you make, you can make some really cool overlapping images, overlapping scenes, um, trees, like so much cool stuff with this. Um, and then random, well, random's random, and it goes all over the place, and you can adjust the strength of that. This is really cool if you're doing like starscape stuff like that. So if you have like a bunch of like star brushes that you made, and we can kind of see the chaos that ensues with this type of brush. And you can see that those north, east, southwest markers, they're all over the place. And with this, you can start coupling this with a bunch of other brushes over and over again. And that's when stuff gets super neat. So one of the things I do from tattooing is we do a lot of dragons, we do a lot of snakes, and we always get requests for you know, very specific things. And when I got into Clip Studio for the first time, uh, I saw what some people were doing with the brushes online. I was just like, can I use this to make scales? Can I use this to make like stuff that's going to make my job easier? And yeah, lo and behold, figured out how to do a lot of this stuff with snake scale brushes. And I'm gonna crack open, where is it here? Rocks, rubble, debris, G-pen. There we go. Okay, so this is my snake scale brushes, and I'm just gonna bring one out here. This is scale 1. So for me, a brush like this saves so much time when I'm trying to draw, design, and create snakes, dragons, all this kind of stuff for clients. And then this way they can see it and happening right in front of them, which is so advantageous because a lot of people have, they're not artistic, you know, they don't see, they can't see like we do. And when you actually show them how it is, it's like you're doing a magic trick for them. So with a brush like this, it's like a double magic trick because they literally see the snake or the dragon come alive. But there's specific settings with this brush in particular, and I'll kind of go into them. I'm just going to clear that off. Now, the main thing is the actual uh, drawing of it. And I'll just bring up kind of like a stamp. Oh, maybe not. Hold on. Let's clear that off for a second. And there we go. So with this brush, it's segmented. And as you can see, I'm going to go over here. I got my red marker. It kind of rolls. So we have it thinner here and thinner here. And the way that this is set up on the brush, and I'll bring that brush back. There we go. We're going to go over here into the tip shape, and you can see right here, bring this up. There we go. That's what I wanted. This is the actual brush right here, and this is set on a repeating pattern. Now, when you're doing a repeating pattern with Clip Studio Paint, you got to make sure that you have no extra pixels floating on the outside of that brush. If you do, your brush will not butt up against itself, and you'll have this tiny little gap in between each of the segments. If you have that tiny gap, and you have that little gap going on, you're going to go nuts figuring out, like, why is my brush not working the way that it is? More times than not, it's because you drew it on a fresh open layer, and you have literally like 1 or 2 pixels that have feathered out, and it's not allowing it to butt up or overlap with each other. So make sure that you have a clean section or a window that you're working on and draw right to the edge of it. And then that way, when you're doing your repeating patterns, you're not going to have any of those weird floating pixels floating around. So we're going to go down here, and now on this brush, I have it set to ribbon. And if you have it set to ribbon, it literally will repeat the pattern over and over and over again in sequence. And we'll just get rid of that again. And then that's how you end up with, you know, this really, really nice looking scale. And if we get in close here, and we can see that where the break is in the brush is super, super tiny. And I think it's like right there. But when you're doing for this kind of stuff for clients, they're not zooming in right there. They're just going to see the snake scale brush, and when you go to use this, especially for me and with tattooing, this works out perfectly. And we're going to go back over here, click on that guy, and ribbon over here. All right, stroke texture. And one of the other things I want to go over with everyone with this too is there's a couple cool features in Clip Studio Paint that allow you to have your brush either come forward or go backward. I know that a lot of people will use this particular setting for watercolor brushes to mix and blend with their colors. But I found it, because of using these kind of brushes, it actually allows you to kind of like recess or build up on top of itself. So I'll show you what I mean here. I'll clear this off again and bring this back in. Just give me a little space. Correction. I just got to find out where it is. Sorry. Oh, there it is. I was on the right spot. So with this kind of brush, as I go like this, you can kind of see that it'll overlap itself and it's kind of coming toward you. But if we click on blend brush tips with darken, as I overlap, it now goes behind it. So depending on what you want, sometimes you don't want things, you know, coming at you, you want them receding. So that's one of those super handy things with Clip Studio Paint that I found out about that really, really helped me, because I was just like, oh, I want it, you know, I want the dragon to like be coming over things. So initially it was set on this one. It was clicked when I started doing the brush, and it's like, oh, why is it going backwards? And then clicked on that, clicked it off, and then boom, you know, I was able to make it come toward me. So, and I mentioned, sorry about that, I'm just pausing right now. Mention one of the things when you're building your brushes to kind of like build to the edges, make sure there's no pixels or anything like that. So one of the things that I do is I have this little grid that I have set up, and in the Gumroad store with the brush set that I'm going to put this grid in there, and then that way, if you're making your brushes, hopefully this will help you out. But this way, I can take this grid and set it to any kind of parameters that I want. So if I'm making something that's a bit longer or a bit fatter or a bit square, at least this way I kind of have all these guide marks that I can use. And that way, if I'm using the symmetry tool, which I did use for this brush, I can make sure that I'm on the center and things are lining up to where I need them. So this is a handy little tool that I use specifically for making brushes. And without this, this is where I started running into problems, because I was finding out that like things were either heavy on one side and things weren't lining up, but simply just by having this, I was able to have a guideline and be like, oh, cool, that's off by a bit. Or with this kind of brush that I'm making right now, this is the new snake scale brush that I'm working on, I can kind of see in relation to how things are working. And if I'm pushing things too far in one direction, you know, like this way, or if I need it pulled out that way, I can see in relation to the grid on what I need to do. And yeah, that's going to be a little freebie. Then I'm going to be tossing in with a little brush pack that I have on my Gumroad store, and that should be up hopefully later on today for everybody. Now, well, I might as well show you this scale brush that I'm working on. This scale brush is actually a little bit different than the previous one that I showed you. Now, this scale brush kind of does the top scales and the belly scales simultaneously. So with this brush, this is all just top scales. And this other brush here, this one is specifically for drawing the underbelly of the dragons, snakes, and whatever. And I can use this brush as well as this brush in conjunction with each other, and I can mesh them together. And I'll show you guys how I do that a little bit later on. But for right now, I want to show you this new brush that I'm working on because I'm really, really stoked on the way this one's turning out. So we'll go back over here, we'll clear this off. And as you can see, these are, this is some of the tests that I went through. So as I was working this brush, I wanted to kind of see how the overall shape was going to work, if my idea, my plotting was working out, and it was close. It was working out in some directions, but in other directions, it wasn't doing what I wanted to. So that's where I come back to this, and I'm able to draw with the grid, and I'm able to work out some of the problems that I was having with this brush, namely these sections right there. These scales, you know, I wasn't feeling the way that they're looking. They're a little too round, a little too bulbous. And come back here, and I kind of came up with a couple of different shapes, including kind of like this tooth specific looking shape. Kind of looks like you're looking at somebody's, you know, inside of their under part of their mouth, the roof of their mouth. So we'll clear this off. So that was the test that I worked with. And this is kind of the process that I go through with a lot of my brushes is I will make a bunch of mock-ups, make those brushes, see how they're working. And then once I'm on the right path, then I'll start making cleaner and cleaner versions of them. So let's get back to the brush here, brush made, and not those ones. Here we go. So, and then from there, I'll clear this off. This was the next scale test that I made of the brush. And I'm really liking the way that this is turning out. But again, there's a couple little issues I was having with this. But this is part of the fun process for me is I get to find out all these cool little puzzles and techniques and little fun things that popped up and it's like, oh, I didn't know it can do that. So with this one, I was really noticing that this part right here, I needed to have kind of more of a hump shape to my brush. And I like the way this was, but now this is where I can start crafting the actual body of the snake and body of the dragon just with the way that I'm using the brush. And if we go back here, we can kind of see the shape is a little bit different. And I kind of rolled through a couple different other, where are they? There they are. A couple different tests to get to where I wanted to. So we'll clear that one off. And then this was the next one that I made up. Now they look pretty similar, but again, there's subtle differences. With this one, ran into some issues again, namely these scales right here. Right there. I'm kind of not liking how they're sticking out in this spot. But overall, I'm liking the direction where this is going. And this is part of my process. This is the way that I like to approach things is like trial, error, test stuff out and see where I can grab stuff and push it either into new brushes or pull them away from existing ones. And I'm going to get into, clear that one off. And then this was a different one that I made up, kind of made like a different, kind of like more like bulby scales. But also with this one, I wasn't liking how close the belly scales were to each other. And then kind of came to the end result. And this is the one where I can start adapting and growing off of now that I'm really, really close to the desired effect that I'm looking for. So this one, now I got the scales nicely separated on the bottom. I got more spacing for the belly, which is really good for the coloring of the tattoo and stuff like that. But now I got to adjust my top scale shapes and figure out exactly how I want those to look. So, but I'm going to show you how I got the scales on the belly scales to separate. So I'm going to bring back up this, and we're going to go back to brush tip. So on the brush tip here, I'm just going to blow this up a little bit more so we can see it. There we go. We have a sequence of images here. So they all look the same, but they're actually all a little bit different. And unfortunately, it won't let me show them on here. But each scale, let's see if I can show you. Now, if I pull slowly, you'll be able to see them play. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So you can see as they play, there's like a blank gap in between them, and that's actually solid white. So every fourth one will have this belly scale, and that's the sequence that they'll repeat in. And this is one of the powerhouses, like secret powerhouses of Clip Studio Paint, is you can lay image sequences in sequence and have them how you want. Now, when I saw this in Clip Studio, I was like, oh my, like, really? What? This is amazing. Like, there's so much I can do with this. And the first thing naturally I thought of was like, how can I make my job that much easier? And the first thing I thought of was like snake scale brushes. So that's what I started working on. But the other thing that I started working on is rock, rubble, and debris brushes. So I'm going to bring this up. Now, because I draw comic books, love drawing manga, love drawing battle scenes, love drawing like, things blowing up. A lot of that stuff can take a lot of time. So also for doing storyboards and stuff like that too, I found doing storyboards for video games, the company that I was working with, they kind of do like more higher end detailed storyboards. So they're really, really like clear, vivid shots. And there's a lot of destruction in one of the things that we had to do. So I started thinking, I was like, man, it'd be so much quicker if I could just have, a brush that I can just make rocks, rubble, debris for when I need them. But this is after the fact of that job, so that's how a lot of stuff happens. Where I run into the problem, I think about it, and then it's like, oh, I wish I would have had X, Y, and Z to do the job. Then I go make the brush, and that's kind of exactly where I came up with this one. So with this, I'm just going to close this off a little bit here. There we go. So this is my rock, rubble, and debris brush. And so with this, as we can see, these are all just different images that I have sequenced together, and I have a lot of them. And you can quickly build up, a scene where stuff is like floating or blowing up, being destroyed all over the place, or like having some kind of like, lone mecha warrior coming out of like a cityscape that he's just destroyed. Cool stuff like that. But in Clip Studio, I'm just going to blow this back up here. I'm going to show you just how many images I have in this one brush. So yeah. So as I pull that across, these are all the images that I have strung together just for this one brush. I kind of wanted to see how far I could push Clip Studio Paint before I kind of broke the brush engine. And I thought this one would have did it for sure, but no, it worked totally great. I think in this one I have approximately, I think it's like 25 separate images that I have just for that one brush. But what that allows for me to do is to have way more control and have a real chaotic feel to the randomness of the debris. Now, one thing that you're going to notice is the patterns aren't really repeating. Like like as I pull it across, you know, even ones that are like really close to each other, there is a variance between them. Like this one right here and this one right here, even though they're kind of like on the same plane, because I have the randomness set up and because I use this image in different positions, it really allows Clip Studio to jump in between all those images and allows for true randomness and true chaos when you're making this kind of brush. I found with Clip Studio Paint, because again, I was testing these brushes out. When I had it set to random, the pattern would repeat every so often. So I found like a little bit of a workaround with that. And that workaround is something that I learned that I could apply this to a lot of other brushes and actually get even more brushes out of the artwork that I'm already using over and over again, which kind of builds up my library, which is awesome because if you are doing comic books or your own illustration, obviously you want your own sense of style and your own flair to come out. So if you have brushes that are uniquely set to you and you can get more of them, your style will always be dominant in the brushes that you make, which is something that is fantastic with Clip Studio Paint because it just gives you more control over your end result, which is something that I really enjoy. My whole goal is whatever tools that I need to get to the end result outweighs how I got there. You know, and that's just me. Being a tattoo artist for 20 years, I come to realize a lot of people just really want the end result, and they don't care if you toiled 40 hours to get there. They'll be like, oh, cool, sweet dragon tattoo, let's do it. And I'll be there being like, oh, but all my energy I put into it, you know, my life source. Uh, but yeah, go back to here, go back to here. So because of you can reutilize and reuse things over and over again in Clip Studio to make these brushes. As you can see here, I have a lot of different rock, rubble, debris brushes, and that's because I'm able to reuse these assets over and over again in different ways. And it just allows for more variation on the same thing, which is great because then you can start building up your own personal library. And that's one of the things I'm doing for my comic book project, Caius, Story of Blood and Stone. I'm working on issue 2 right now, and with issue 2, I'm getting to really plot and plan for all this stuff that I get to make in the comic book down the road. And using the image sequencer for the materials here, that is one of the most powerful things for me in making that comic book because honestly, I'm a really slow artist. So if I had anything that can speed up my process down the road, I'm going to take full advantage of it. So with these brushes too, I'm going to bring up my vine brush and I'll kind of explain what I'm talking about here. So this is a new brush that I'm working on. This is a vine brush. And I'm just going to pull it up here. There it is. So that and white, and there we go, and black and white, perfect. So what I have here is 4 images stuck together, but the funny thing is it's 4 of the same image. And what I did is I just took the one singular image, I flipped it 90 degrees and then flipped it horizontally and then flipped it again. But because I was using my little grid sequence here, I'll pull that up, there it is. And then I was just able to stretch it to fit my canvas that I'm working on. So when I go to do the brush for the image material, I can make more brushes out of just the one picture. And what I actually did is I drew up 5 different ones, but because I drew up 5 different ones, I can now multiply those brushes over and over again and almost like trade in between them. And now I have like an infinite variety of one particular vine brush that I can now use in all my comic books. And let's see, and I'll kind of show you how I make that work. So let's go into this. So we got that, and I'll break open my stuff here. And break open the layers. Where is that? I got so many things on the go. Okay, there it is. And get rid of that. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll have my grid set up. I don't know why it's on top, but okay, there we go. So I have my grid set up. And then from there, I can see where I need to line stuff up. So that way this brush, when I put it in a repeating pattern, it'll sync up. And then that way, you know, it'll string together very, very nicely. Let's do this. And so I have, let's blow this up a little bit so we can all see here. And I can see that I kind of lined everything up to this, there we go, this grid line right here. Oop, right there. There and there. So that way, as I go across, all the way to the other end, and same thing, it lines up. Just something simple. That way I know where I should be starting and stopping my brushes. And then once I have that, let's bring that back down. Let's get rid of that. And then I do my line work. And so once I got my line work set up, I will use this. Where is it? I will set it so this is my reference layer, and that's right here. Set as reference layer. Click on this. There we go. And then I'll go to my paint bucket tool, and I'll go down here and I'll make sure that, let's just open this up a little bit here. Refer to multiple, and then I have this clicked on. And with that clicked on, I can now make a new layer underneath. Oh, I want to set it to white though. And I can just fill in all that stuff because it's using that top layer as a reference. And then once I have all of that set up, what I do is then I will merge them together. Control E. All right. Then go to edit, and then the same process as before, image, give it a name, new test vine, brush tape, that, image, brush, give it a tag. Let's say new vine test. And there we go. So now that we have this one image, we can now copy that, transform it, flip it, and repeat that process again. Image. Now this is kind of like the tedious part of making the brushes, just because this is a lot of repetitive stuff that you got to do over and over again. But the end result is, again, you now have a tool that you can use over and over again for exactly what you need. And then from there, make another copy. And then this time, Control T, we want to flip it the other way. We want to do it so it's a horizontal flip. Get rid of the underneath one, and repeat and repeat. So from this one drawing, I got 4 brushes or 4 drawings that I can use for 1 brush. And the best part is, we'll go back over here and do this and make brushes and mag, and there it is. So this is, I have it pre-made already. And this is that one brush with that same repeating pattern of the one image, but it doesn't look like it. And that's because you used it in different ways and you flipped it and flopped it. If you just use from the one brush, just from the one angle, it'll repeat itself and it looks very stagnant and repetitive. But this way, it still looks like your style. And even though you used only the one image, because you have a little bit of pre-planning, a little bit of pre-thought, it all links up. So yeah, part of the process, like I said, is trying to think and utilize how you can already use stuff that you already have as brushes, especially if you have a specific style for your comic book or your artwork. I guarantee a lot of you out there kind of like draw repeated stuff over and over again. I'd suggest looking at your artwork and seeing what you can use to make brushes, and then that way you start building more assets that you have, so you can speed up processes in your artwork and be making a lot more cool stuff as time goes on. Let's see here. Made brushes. And I personally use this process over and over and over again. So like, leaf brushes, like if you've been to the asset store, one thing that I'll suggest is if you find brushes that you really like, you really enjoy, download those brushes and start dissecting them. Like bring them into the editor here and see how that person made that brush. And if there's a specific thing that they like or that you like that they did, then you can start applying that to your brush and pulling that information and be like, oh, I like the way that blends really nice, but I want a different shape. So you can make your shape and then just, put that into that brush, which is super effective in building your own personal library. But I'm gonna show a couple other brushes that I have right here. Again, a lot of the stuff that I do is for working things out down the road. One of the things that I know that I have you're going to run into drawing comic books at some point is that you're going to have to draw lots of people in crowds at some point. We ran into a storyboard issue where, again, we had lots of crowd scenes, and I wish I would have had this particular tool ahead of time. But because I ran into that problem, I was like, oh, there's a problem that needs a solution. So I ended up making this crowd brush, and let's see, there it is. That's the one that I want. Get rid of this one. And with this crowd brush, it just allows me to lay out a crowd really quickly. And the way that I designed this brush is very open, very generic. And then I can, change the opacity, and then I can start changing the features on the people that are walking, adjust it. But to lay out something really quick that you can use as a guideline and a template, I found this brush is really invaluable for me, especially when I'm working on storyboards and crowd scenes, stuff like that, because eventually you're always going to have somebody that's going to request some kind of crowd scene of people walking around, or potentially even uh, uh, oh, that's why. There we go. A mass of people, running away or something like that. And the way that I have this brush set up is on pressure sensitivity. That's why I'm able to go from really small, and as I start applying pressure, it really gives the effect and the illusion that the crowd is getting bigger and coming toward you. And again, that's all with these the brush settings that you have in here. And with the stroke, again, if you want to have people coming toward you, or if you want people recessing away from you. And you can do that just with the blend brush tips to Tarkin. Super awesome, great feature in Clip Studio Paint. And we got those, got that. All right, clear that up. One of the other things that for tattooing is we do a lot of, at least I do, I work on Japanese related artwork. So that means very stylized sumi-e wash brush kind of stuff. But I kind of like doing a blend between like a hard line version of that and kind of like semi-traditional. So I made these rock brushes, and again, this just allows me to really quickly just build stuff that I can build upon. Like I'm not going to maybe use this exactly, but I can use this as a quick template. And sometimes this is a lot faster than me drawing from scratch. If I got something to work on and work from, I'm able to use the brushes that I made and build something over top of it. And these are also some wave brushes that I made up, and let's pull in the brush tip. And as we can see, again, I use that repeating process in the image sequencer over and over again, and I have different settings here. I have this one set to direction of line, and then that way, whatever the line that I'm pushing forward, that's the way that the wave is going to follow, which is really cool, specifically for Japanese style brush or Japanese wave brushes, because you want the wave to feel like it's crashing and cresting onto things. So having it set specifically to directional line and adjusting the angle of rotation, as we can see, if we move that around, that will affect how the brush reacts. And as we can see, this now has that kind of flow and that kind of curve to it. And then from there, I'm able to draw in the rest of what I need, sketch it out, and then get a nice clean finish line drawing from that. I use a lot of my brushes for laying out what I need, and then I'll be able to go over top of them for my finished line drawing. It's more like about utilizing the tools to get to the end, like I said. I'm just going to clear that off. Brush tips, rock brushes. Let's see. And yeah, hopefully this information is useful to you out there. Just because I use the brushes a little bit differently. Like I'm not just setting it up for blending and artwork. It's very line heavy. So, oh, hello.
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 I was just slowly trying to interject so we can get to the questions, if you don't mind.
Oh,
Do you have anything
okay.
else you want to finish up with?
Oh yeah. I want to show one thing here quickly.
Yes, of course. Go ahead.
Yeah. All right. So let me clear this off. Get that over there. This is. Okay, so this is a new vector layer. Where is it? So I'm just going to use, yeah, let's use this guy. So we're going to do this. We're going to use this scale brush, and say that you draw your snake, your dragon, whatever, and you're like, oh, cool, I like it, but I wish parts of it were a different way, or maybe I can see it from a different angle. One of the things that you can do is bring this up. You can now select it, and because it's on the vector layer, you can grab your angle, and you can actually rotate the brush in real time on the axis of the line, which is super awesome, because sometimes you want to have a little bit of more variety, but you like the shape of the way that the thing that you got right off the bat. And this is one of the ways that you can do that. There's also other ways that you can overlay new brushes on top of the existing line that you did on the vector. Yeah, this is the one thing that I wanted to show everybody as well. Super cool. There's lots of vector stuff I'd like to get into as well, but yeah, it sounds like we're kind of coming near the end here and running out of time. So if you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to hit me up on any of my social media. That's the Ryan Cardinal, and that's where you can find me on absolutely everywhere. If you got questions, fire them at me there, but it looks like we're heading into the questions section here, so you can fire them at me as well.
Yeah, we've had a lot of questions because you're just showing things that certainly seem magical to some people, I'm sure. To me, certainly some of those like, wait a minute, they could do that kind of moments a lot there. So you just touched on the vector layers here at the end. But a lot of the brushes you use seem to be on raster layers. Like, what do you usually prefer?
When I'm drawing my comic book, I'll hop in between both of them actually. I'll be drawing both in vector and raster depending on what I specifically need. So yeah, it's definitely a blend of both.
Okay, so you don't have like a general recommendation, like in terms of size or rescalability or anything?
Not so much. Yeah, I haven't really noticed too much difference. The only real difference that I notice is when I'm doing my coloring book project, I draw all that in vector. So depending on certain brushes that I'm using, because it's flipping it to both sides, I notice that there's a little bit of slowdown, but that's just because it's trying to calculate vector lines on how many different grids I have set up. So
Okay.
yeah.
Speaking of grids, you created those grids for creating your brushes. Did you just create those by trial and error, or did you have like a systematic approach to that?
A little bit of a systematic approach. Here, let me pull that up again. Oop, let's get rid of that. So yeah, I just wanted something that was obviously that I could divide into 4. So I have my black line there, and then I have my 4 sections. And then I also wanted something that had lines going vertically and horizontally that I could line up depending on which way I was making my brush. And I also found that by doing this kind of like diamond shape in the middle, it allows me to visually see. I don't know if you ever like drawn in squares where like you're doing a portrait and you have it all broken up into a grid, and then you can kind of translate the grid onto your other piece of paper. That's kind of why I have it set up like this, so I can see where my spatial relations are.
Yeah. Do you have a preferred size? Like this one's like 1,500 by 1,500 and 300 dpi.
Usually at 300 dpi, but because I just have it set so I can use it as a JPEG, and then that way I can slap it onto any image that I'm using or any canvas size that I'm using, because it's more just a guideline. It's not like anything holy, you know.
Yeah,
it's just yeah, and then that way I can transform it to whatever shape that I need to fit that canvas.
Yeah. And do you think it's generally better when creating brushes to go bigger or smaller? Like it probably depends too, but
Yeah, because I have come up with a couple issues where if I am using it on say like a 600 dpi line drawing, but my brushes I drew it at 300, sometimes there might be a little bit of scaling issue. But if it's for tattoo work, it's not really a necessary issue because the end result is for a stencil. So once I have it drawn up, it's going to either get blown up or shrink down anyway. So as long as the line art is clean, I can work with that with a tattoo.
Yeah. Speaking of your tattoo work, like how do you usually fit the brushes and the design process into one workflow once the client comes to you with an idea?
Okay. So they will come to me with an idea, with a rough concept. More times than not, a lot of people that come to me for tattoos, they don't draw themselves, so they're kind of just being like, "Please make something cool," I'm like, "Oh, I got you, fam. It's all good." And so they'll come with me with references, and I'll take the image references that they have, and I'll do a very, very loose sketch. Let me see if I have anything on hand here. And then from there, I'll give the loose sketch back to them, because there's no point in me drawing a finished, complete drawing that they might not like. If they can see the sketch, then we both agree that it works, then I'll do a finished line drawing.
Mm-hmm.
And with Clip Studio, just because of the way that the brushes work, it really, really applies to tattooing. Just because, what is it, with the mapping pen, that kind of acts almost like a tattoo needle because it's just that one dead line weight.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you do like these kinds of lines? Like with the brushes, you get like a lot of lines.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have like a balance for like details and just big shapes for tattooing?
Oh, definitely. If you have something that's too heavily detailed, I like to call it noodly detail, where you're
Uh-huh.
just getting into something, and you're like, oh, I'm really digging the way that these little needles on this pine tree are looking. That's not
Mm.
going to look very good on a tattoo over 15 years. It's all just going to blur and merge together. So you got to be
Hmm.
very aware of your the space that you're using.
Hmm. Okay. There was a question about seamless brushes.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any tips on how to check if they're actually seamless, or is it just
Uh,
trying?
un Unfortunately, a lot of it is trial and error.
Hmm.
But if you work within a specific box, like that's one of the reasons why I made this grid, because then I can see where things are lining up.
Hmm.
Let's see. Let me pull this up here. Oh, sorry about that, everybody. With the grid here, and there we go. That's what I want. There we go. So with the grid, and I'm using the symmetry brush as well. And there we go. We got the symmetry line going on there. When it comes to seamless brushes and stuff like that, you want to make sure that you, especially if it's a repeating pattern, I find that using the symmetry brush, you'll get a nice clean fit, but also make sure that your canvas is squared off so that it's an even number, not like ending in 5 or 3 or anything like that.
Hmm.
Because then you might get a little bit of a weird variance when you make your brush.
Hmm. Do you use the post correction feature at all for your brushes? Like
Uh,
some brushes they adjust once the line is drawn.
Sometimes, oh, this is something that I should mention too. When I'm drawing these brushes, I'll draw them on a vector layer first.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then once I have the vector drawing, and then I'll just convert it to the raster image when I save it over
Okay.
for the actual brush.
Okay.
Yeah.
And speaking of layer types, do you use any like the color versions of where you can change the colors of the brushes?
Well,
Or using
a
that
lot of the
feature?
stuff that a lot of the stuff that I use is basically for black and white line drawings. But I do, depending on the drawing, I will set up the brush specifically so I can cycle through it. So it is, you can color the line art or the subcolor as well.
Mm-hmm. Can you really quick show how that works? What's important about
Uh,
that?
yeah. Funny enough, you kind of have to do it in grayscale when you make the brush.
Mm-hmm.
So that way, the image, let's just go over here, click and clear that off. And I just need black. All right, cool. So do that. I just want, and the other one's got to be white. Unfortunately, you won't be able to see it. So do that. Oh, that's not helping. There. I'm just going to gray out the background here quickly. Sorry about that. There we go. That's better.
No worries, no rush.
Yeah. So yeah, uh, when you're making the brush, you generally want to make it grayscale so that way it's definitively black or white. Let's see here and do that. and that way you can apply whatever the top color or the subcolor is to that image. Oh, cancel. Yeah, one of the reasons that I convert it to raster is because I always forget that the vector tool doesn't like saving as a brush tip.
Oh yeah.
There we go. Yeah, sorry, I forgot. It's super important. Should have mentioned that. Yeah, it's funny, like whatever is going through your mind while you're trying to explain stuff and you accidentally forget all this super important stuff. Let's see,
No
image
problem.
material, brush, and black and white.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot like
Oh,
that,
no,
but
no, no,
it's
no, no,
always
this is,
a good thing to explain, I think.
oh yeah, exactly, exactly. Let's go like that. Now, let's just grab one of these, go like that, duplicate. Let's go like that. Bring this guy up and brush tip material. Oh, all right, now I should, in theory, oh, did I forget a step? I think I forgot a step. Oh man, I think I forgot a step. It might color, or do I have, or was it monochrome? So sorry,
Oh,
fam. I completely forgot a step, and I can't pull it out of my head right now.
it's
But
okay. It's
yeah,
okay.
but there is the important thing is you actually have to start with a black and white brush, and it has to be set to either color or not color, but it has to be set to monochrome. But I can't remember if that has to be in
Are you
the
are you trying out the brush on a grayscale layer now? That might also be the reason why it's not showing up.
no.
No,
It's
okay.
yeah, no, it has to be when you actually open up the file. I think the file itself has to be monochromatic or grayscale.
Okay. Well,
Yeah,
there are also tutorials on our website, so how to make brushes for color versions, so we
yeah,
don't have to torture you further with
yeah.
this.
Well, there's another little workaround with that too, is that you can actually just use the subcolor tool
Yeah,
there. Yeah,
yeah. Okay.
yeah.
So, sorry, I
And
didn't
then,
mean to put you on the spot like that.
oh, that's all right.
Okay.
There we go. So
That's
this is actually another way that I do it too, is just because I work with a lot of black and white, and I'll just mess
mhm,
with the subcolors that way. So
yeah. That's a really good way too. That is definitely makes for an interesting effect.
mhm.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's
Um,
one thing with Clip Studio is like there's so many different ways to do a lot of the same things that I found out, and I was just like, oh, okay, cool. Well, I'll just do it that way.
okay. Do you have any tips for people who can't use like pressure sensitivity a lot, or how important is pressure sensitivity for the brushes that you use personally?
For me, pressure sensitivity, depending on the brush, like the snake scale brush, it is definitely a bonus. Um, but yeah, for me, a lot of the brushes are pressure sensitive, just because I have that control of being able to go to small to thin just by, applying that pressure to it. But there are a couple different settings with the starting and ending of the brush. I'll bring that up
Mhm.
here quickly. So starting and ending, you can see how it tapers, and you can adjust that on the snake scale brushes. But for the way that I draw them, I find that it's a little too sharp, especially when
Hmm.
I'm trying to reapply that as a tattoo. So the pen pressure works much better for me.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
the taper is like it almost goes to infinity kind of a thing.
Hmm.
So if I have if I have the scale just kind of like gets smaller, 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 smaller until it's a
Yeah.
blur.
Yes. Okay. And lastly, let's see one more question. How do you come up with the ideas for your brushes?
A lot of it is sitting around and thinking, what do I need for the future? Uh, like for Caius, my comic book, A Story of Blood and Stone, I think of the landscapes. I think of the things that I'm going to be drawing over and over again. And like in issue 2, it's very, very jungle heavy. So I'm thinking of all of these things that I'm going to have repeating patterns of jungle foliage, rock cliffs, waterfalls. If you kind of picture Avatar with the blue cat people, kind of like where they live, and those are the images that I'm going to be doing over and over again. So I'm building up a brush library of that because I'm going to be existing in that section of the world for at least a couple of issues. So it's really about planning ahead and what you are going to need in the future. That's how I go about it.
Okay, very good. And here's your chance to plug your brush store and your art book and your comic.
Awesome. Yeah, so I'm working on issue 2 right now of Caius, A Story of Blood and Stone. I'm looking to crowdfund that in late 2020. Book 1 is out, and there will be a feature on the Indiegogo where you can get both books 1 and 2. The thing with the book, they are all very limited press or limited print runs. So once those single issues are gone, they will be gone and they won't be reprinted as single issues. If you want to go check out my Gumroad story, you can go check it out at gumroad.com, the Ryan Cardinal. And if you want to hit me up on any of my social media, it's all the same. You can find me everywhere at the Ryan Cardinal, and that's on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, you name it, that's the name.
All right, thank you very much
Yeah.
for your time today.
Thank you so much,
Thank you guys
guys.
for having me. This is awesome.
Thank you, Ryan. You have mind blown everybody. There's so many options, and sky's the limit. So I hope everybody got really inspired by Ryan and his workflow. And before we leave, I just want to share with you that for more information and learn more about Clip Studio Paint, please visit our website, the website from clipstudio.net/n and our website graphicsly.com. The webinar is being recorded and we will share it tomorrow on Graphicsly's YouTube channel. Also, it will be in Celsius Web. And for more information about Ryan, his projects, Cañas, please visit his website. And as he mentioned, he's on all social media, so you can find his brushes, Gumroad, and any other project that Ryan is into. So the Ryan Cardinal is on Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook. So thank you so much, Ryan.
Well, thank you very much for having me. This has been totally awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much, Joanna, for all the questions. There were tons of it. And we'd like to remind you that please follow us on social media for more webinars and stay tuned for more information. So thank you so much, and I will see you on the next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.